Welcome to Lost Girl Therapy. This is part 4 of the health journey and how the hell did we get here. So we left off, it is September of 2021 and I have just moved to Boston, and honestly everything was going really well until it wasn't. So to set the scene, I was in the second year of my master's. I had recently started working at a research job that I was really enjoying. I was dating this really great guy. Everything was going like phenomenally well. And then I just started to feel kind of off, and I started experiencing like extreme fatigue to the point where I had difficulty like getting out of bed or getting through the day. It felt like I was just moving through mud. And I noticed that I was having super high sensitivity to sound. So if I put a glass down on the counter, it felt like someone was shattering it in my ear. If I was watching TV, I could feel the volume like go up and down, even though I hadn't touched the remote. And to be honest, I thought that something was wrong with the TV, and I had never even considered that something could be wrong with me. And I was running like a low-grade fever, but it just kind of felt like I had the flu, but it wasn't bad enough for me to stay home. And it really depended on the day. There were moments where I felt great, and then there were moments where I just felt like complete and utter poo. And I just was like, I'm in this brand new city. Everything else is going really well. Like I've had the flu before, I'll be fine. So for the month of September, I just kind of started getting more and more and more tired, but I just kept going. And I distinctly remember going to a friend's birthday party on a pier, and the pier had like those very bright lights that you would see at like a stadium. And the moment I stepped foot on the pier, I had a panic attack. So I felt like I was going to throw up. I completely like lost sensation in my hands. I felt like I needed to like run away. And that was my first experience with ever really having like an anxiety and or a panic attack. And it was terrifying. And I remember being like, I need to get out of this situation right now, which was interesting because I had never had that sense of fight or flight so succinctly. But I just attributed it to being like dehydrated, or, like really bright lights were bothering me, and it is what it is. After that, I started losing vision in my left eye probably like a few times a week for very short periods of time. So like 20 or 30 seconds, my vision would just completely black out. Now, at first I thought it was positional because I would be laying down in bed, I would roll over to my nightstand to like pick up a glass of water or pick up a book, and I would turn back and my vision would just be gone. And the first time it happened, it scared the bejesus out of me. I basically sat there in my bedroom at 9:30 at night, and I was terrified. I put my hand over my right eye, and it was complete darkness in my left. And then it came back. So just as quickly as it was gone, it was back. And then I just kind of figured it was a fluke. And that started happening more and more and more frequently, to the point where my vision was going out multiple times throughout the week or throughout the day, depending on what I was doing. And I started having very high sensitivity to any version of movement or vibration. So if you guys have ever lived in Boston, you'll know that the Boston T is just it's a lot when it comes to vibration. It rattles a lot. And so me taking the T to school was like the most grueling adventure, because I would feel fine, and then I would get on the T and it would feel like my entire nervous system had just been shaken to the point that I was going to either be sick or faint. I would show up at school having sweat through my clothes for no reason. It would be 45 degrees, and I would have had the entire arc of an anxiety attack before I even made it into a classroom. And then there was this one distinct moment where I was sitting in supervision with one of my bosses, and I had noticed that the lights had begun to bother me. So we had those hi-hat fluorescents, and I just noticed that they were bothering me, but I didn't really think anything of it. And I had gone to sit in her office, and all of a sudden I was about to faint. So I got really hot, really nauseous. I couldn't feel any part of my body, and I nearly passed out. And that is when I went to Student Health Services. So at this point, we are in October. This has been going on for probably 6-ish weeks. And I go to Student Health Services, and they're basically we suspect that you have a migraine. Now, I was very naive to think that every migraine needed a headache, But they put me in a room, they turn the lights off, and I feel worlds better. And they give me a shot of Toradol, and they basically are like, go home, go to sleep, you're gonna be fine. If your vision does not stop dark, like if your eye goes out for longer than X amount of time, take yourself to the ER. So I go home, I sleep for 3 days. I'm basically like, yep, we're good. Toradol worked, fine. Go back to school, I feel horrible. I go home and I pretty much like do not ever really recover. And I know it sounds really dramatic, but when I tell you that this was easily one of the more difficult moments of my life, I mean that. And it is because every single part of me felt afraid and confused and upset and scared, and nothing made sense. Advil didn't help, and Tylenol didn't help, and cold and flu didn't help, and nothing really was like painful. I just felt utterly exhausted, and my joints had begun to hurt. And then the day, October 30th, so 2 days before my birthday, I literally wake up in the morning and my left eye vision is just gone. And it's gone for like too long for any normal person to like feel good about. And at this point, I am so scared that I'm calm. And I basically get dressed, make myself breakfast, have a cup of coffee, still can't see, and I walk myself to Mass Eye and Ear. And I go, I sit down in the emergency room, and then everything just kind of goes to like hell in a handbasket.